Hello Year 5, welcome back to the penultimate chapter of The Day I Fell Into a Fairy Tale. That means the second to last chapter. There's 2 chapters left. So, Lana and Harrison have been turned into wooden statues by the witch. And it finished yesterday with a zwing, the sound of an arrow. So let's find out what's going to happen. The very next moment, Lana found she could move. She spun to face the cauldron, but instead of seeing Harrison in the pot, much to her relief, her brother had almost transformed back to his usual self. And next to him, the little old man was staring in shock. Looking down, Lana saw the outline of the witch, face down on the floor, covered by her silk cloak. Sticking up out of the cloak was a single golden arrow. The little old man raised both hands in surrender. Lana followed his gaze to the open door, and standing beyond it was the prince, holding his long bow. Prince Otto had heard the horn and come to the rescue, just in the nick of time. "Lana, are you all right?" he asked, rushing to her side. "I came as soon as I could." Suddenly there was the sound of beating wings, and a giant swan landed in the doorway. "Briar Rose!" exclaimed Lana. But instead of greeting them, the swan thumped across the wooden floor, snatching up the witch's silk cloak to reveal that her body had disappeared. Instead, right where the witch had been lying, there was a large frog with ruby red eyes. "It's the witch!" called Harrison. "She's still alive!" No sooner had he spoken when the frog made a leap for the open window. But the swan was too quick for it. With a single beat of its wings, it launched itself into the air, knocking the frog upwards with a strike of its beak, and then opening its mouth wide so that the helpless amphibian plunged straight down its gullet. Then the swan swallowed, shook its head, and everyone watched as a frog-shaped lump travelled all the way down its neck and disappeared into its stomach. "Ooh!" said Lana, both delighted and really grossed out. No sooner had it regained its composure than the swan began to change shape. Its legs grew longer, its body thinner, and its neck shorter. Its wings became a white cloak, and Briar Rose emerged in human form. "The witch is gone," smiled Briar Rose, and Lana saw that her eyes were flecked with red. "And she can never hurt us again." "Mama!" called 2 familiar voices. "Children!" cried Briar Rose, kneeling and throwing her arms wide. Hansel and Gretel sprinted towards their mother, and Briar Rose hugged them tight. I don't understand," stammered the prince, astonished. "What are you 2 doing here?" "The witch kidnapped us," said Gretel. "What?" "She turned us into statues," explained Hansel. "She was going to eat us. These children tried to save us, but she turned them into statues too." Briar Rose looked up at the prince. "That witch you just killed was the 13th fairy." "The 13th fairy?" "Exactly. She tricked us. She sent me a letter pretending to be your father, but now she's dead, her magic is transferring to me." But Harrison wasn't smiling. "Lana," his voice trailed away. "What? Where's Rumpolt?" He was right. The little old man, who had been standing beside the cauldron, had completely vanished. Frowning, Lana rushed over, but all that was left was his discarded marine boiler suit. Then something caught Lana's eye. The witch's cabinet was open, and a little brown bird was sitting on top of it. In its beak was a small glass phial, dangling from a ribbon. The powder inside was gold, and the ribbon was purple. Lana gasped. Suddenly it all fell into place. The little brown bird and the little old man were one and the same. The bird turned its head sideways, looking directly at Lana. It chirruped, then took off, swooping over everyone's heads and out of the door. "He's getting away!" Lana exclaimed. "That little bird who just flew off, that's him!" A dreadful thought dawned on her. "I think he's going to shut the portal." "Quick!" said Briar Rose, as she began to change back into a swan. "Climb aboard!" Soon her transformation was complete, and Harrison and Lana clambered onto her back. "Children," announced Briar Rose to Hansel and Gretel, "a fond farewell to our good friends Lana and Harrison. We owe them our lives." And with that she flapped her giant wings and took off, soaring up over the lip of the dell, then plunging down into the valley. "Bye, Lana! Bye, Harrison!" The children's voices rang out among the trees. "Good luck!" But Harrison and Lana were far too focused on clinging on to call back. Tree trunks flashed silver on either side of them, missing them by inches, as Briar-Rose glided onward and downward, skirting the maze of rocks at the foot of the waterfall and on into the forest. Within minutes they were flying above the stream, heading for the river. Looking up, Lana saw the little brown bird just ahead of them, still carrying the file, flying for all it was worth. But Briar-Rose's strength was mighty, and they were gaining on it. "Crack!" called Briar-Rose. The little brown bird, sensing that it was losing the race, veered left into the trees. "That way!" called Lana, pointing after it. "No," replied Briar-Rose. "We'll follow the stream. It's quicker." Sure enough, a few seconds later they broke out of the forest, and Lana glimpsed the little brown bird some 200 metres ahead of them. It's a nice picture of them flying on the swan. "Quick!" Lana called. "He's heading for the portal." Briar-Rose steered left, leaving the stream behind them, and began to race across marshland, gaining on the little bird with every beat of her wings. But then, disaster! A rogue gust of wind caught them, blowing them off course. "There!" called Lana, pointing to the river. The little brown bird was circling above the water, as if it was searching for something. Then it dived beneath the surface and disappeared. Briar-Rose battled the wind, but there was nothing she could do but climb up out of the path of the gust into the stiller air above. "That must be where the portal is," said Lana, pointing to the spot where the bird had dived. "Hold on!" ordered Briar-Rose. She launched herself forwards and began to glide down towards the river. Lana and Harrison gripped onto Briar-Rose's feathers, desperately trying to hang on. Soon the water was rushing up to meet them as Briar-Rose's legs skated through the fast-moving currents at the centre of the river. Then, once she was sure they were safe, Briar-Rose slowed to a stop and settled on the surface. "Here!" she called out, stretching her wings. Lana clung to one and Harrison to the other. "Deep breath!" Lana filled her lungs with air, just as Briar-Rose turned back into human form and dived. Everything went silent as they sank, deeper and deeper. Lana opened her eyes and saw the surface of the water way above her, glimmering in the sunlight. She felt the blood rush to her face as she longed to breathe out. Then, just when she couldn't hold on a second longer, the water fell away. Her breath exploded outwards, and she took in a huge lungful of air. It took a few moments for her to realise that she, Briar-Rose, and Harrison were bobbing like corks inside the clear plastic chute. "Found it!" exclaimed Briar-Rose. "I was about to give up." Lana tried to speak, but couldn't catch her breath. "You need to climb," urged Briar-Rose. The water was rising fast, and it wouldn't be long until the tunnel was flooded. "Lana, you first," instructed Briar-Rose. "Climb on my shoulders and I'll give you a push." Still struggling for breath, her wet arms and legs slipping and sliding on the smooth plastic, Lana did as she was told. "Now stand up!" called Briar-Rose. Using her arms as a brace, Lana wobbled up into a standing position. "Go on, climb!" "I can't," called Lana. "It's too slippy." "Okay," said Briar-Rose. "You're going to have to jump. Crouch down, then throw yourself up." Lana put her hands on the top of Briar-Rose's head and crouched as low as she could. Then, summoning all her strength, she leapt up into the chute. For an awful moment she hovered in mid-air. Then, ever so slowly, she began to rise. She glanced down at Briar-Rose and Harrison, who was already climbing up after her. "Goodbye," she called to Briar-Rose. "Goodbye, Lana." Briar-Rose beamed a smile as bright as the sun. "And thank you." Lana looked up, or was it down, as the walls of the chute began to slide past her, faster and faster, until she wasn't sure if she was rising or falling. She could hear the thundering rush of water gushing up the chute behind her, almost upon her. Then she was most definitely falling down. Down, down, faster and faster, backwards, forwards and sideways, as the tunnel began to twist and turn. Just when she felt she couldn't go any faster, it corkscrewed round and round, slowing her almost to a halt. Her head hit the trapdoor, which instantly gave way, and she opened her eyes to find herself poking out of the Mint Imperial's tub. Lana gasped at the destruction around her. A huge crack had opened up, running the entire length of the supermarket, and it was growing in size by the second, swallowing whatever it came into contact with. She'd barely taken in the chaos surrounding her when she propelled out of the tub and landed with a hard thump on the floor. Harrison's head appeared above her, but before he could say anything, a jet of water thrust him out of the tub, and he landed next to Lana with another hard thump. They made it to the supermarket, but they were far from safe. They leapt to their feet as the crevice grew even longer, swallowing the entire toy aisle to their right. The ground was shaking and rumbling, and there was a terrifying crunch as the steel girder holding up the roof began to buckle. The whole place was about to collapse. "That way!" yelled Lana, pointing towards the front of the store. She held out her hand. Harrison took it, and they ran for their lives. Lana glanced back to see Pick and Mix tubs teetering on the edge of the chasm, showering sweets into the depths before the whole rack plunged downwards. The portals were closing forever. Lana and Harrison ran for all they were worth, heading for the double entrance doors on the other side of the tills. But Lana halted in her tracks, Harrison slamming into her. A red light was flashing, and the electronic doors were opening and shutting rhythmically, directly over the crevice, which now stretched out into the car park. Lana spun round, hoping there was another way out, but the whole building was folding in on itself. This was their only hope. "We have to jump!" yelled Harrison. "We'll never make it," thought Lana. But Harrison was right. It was their only choice. So Lana let all the fear drain from her body, filling it with still and calm. Time slowed to a trickle. She took a deep breath, focusing on the rhythm of the doors. Open, close, open, close. She took a few measured steps backward, then sprinted forward. The doors closed just as she planted her left foot on the lip of the crevice and jumped. She sailed through the air as the doors began to open, reaching the middle once they were as wide as they could go. Then, as they started to close, she began to descend, landing firmly on her right foot on the other side. She glanced back and saw Harrison mid-leap in the doorway, but he had mistimed his jump, and Lana watched helplessly as the double doors closed on her brother's trailing foot, and he began to fall. Straining every muscle, Harrison twisted his upper body and threw out his arms, reaching for the edge. "Help!" screamed Harrison, clinging on with his fingertips. Lana threw herself down to the ground and grabbed hold of his wrists. A mushroom cloud of dust billowed up into the night air as the building collapsed in a heap. "I'm going to fall!" bellowed Harrison. "Lana, I'm going to fall!" Ooh, that was a long but intense chapter, and we have one final chapter left to read tomorrow. So join me for the final part. I've really enjoyed this story, and I hope that you have as well. See you tomorrow. Bye!